How Mossad infiltrates Iran and executes impossible missions. The desert wind whipped across the border town as dusk melted into the horizon, covering everything in a veil of gold and shadow. To most observers, the crossing between Azerbaijan and northern Iran was nothing more than a dusty roadway, dotted with transport trucks and tired workers. But to Eli Ben David, an operations officer who had spent years studying Iran's northern frontier, it was the beginning of an impossible mission. For months, a small Mossad unit had been preparing the entry point. They mapped guard rotations, supply schedules, the rhythms of local merchants, even the changing patterns of stray dogs that roamed the alleys. In intelligence work, the smallest details could mean the difference between slipping into a hostile country unnoticed or vanishing forever. Eli stood inside a dimly lit warehouse, staring at the disguise that would serve as his passport into Iran. The uniform of a regional construction company contracted to repair energy lines near Tabriz. The clothing carried the dust of real work sites. The stitching slightly worn, authentic, lived in, and carefully sourced through months of covert procurement. A local asset, known only by the code name Rumi, waited near an old truck outside. Rumi was an Iranian citizen who had quietly opposed the regime for years. He had no illusions about the danger. Helping a foreign intelligence service was treason. Discovery meant death not only for him, but for his entire family. Yet he had agreed because he believed that exposing the regime's clandestine military program was worth any price. "Once you enter," Rumi whispered in Azerbaijani as Eli approached, "there is no way back through this route for at least 5 days. The patrol will tighten after midnight." "I won't need 5 days," Eli answered, fastening his tool belt. "Just get me through the first checkpoint." They climbed into the truck. The engine groaned to life, its rattling echoing through the warehouse walls. Eli felt the weight of the mission settle over him, an operation that would require absolute silence, flawless timing, and the ability to disappear into a country that specialized in hunting spies. As the truck rolled toward the border, the world shrank to the steady thud of his heartbeat. Ahead, floodlights illuminated the Iranian checkpoint. Guards moved with slow confidence, their rifles slung casually across their chests. A single mistake, a wrong glance, even a breath out of rhythm could end everything. Rumi handed the guard a stack of papers. The officer flipped through them lazily, then shined his flashlight into the cabin. The beam swept over Eli's face. Eli remained still, lowering his gaze the way laborers typically did around uniformed men in the region. "What's your business tonight?" the guard asked. "Repairs," Rumi replied calmly. "Power lines east of Tabriz." The guard hesitated, then waved them through. As they crossed, Eli exhaled silently. He wasn't just inside Iran. He was inside the lion's den, where the smallest misstep could ignite a geopolitical firestorm. Tehran at night was a maze of contradictions. Neon lights flashing over silent alleyways, luxury malls standing beside secret police offices disguised as apartment buildings. For Eli, the city felt like a pulse, alive, unpredictable, and always watching. 36 hours had passed since he crossed the border. His disguise had shifted twice. First a construction worker, then a refrigerated truck mechanic, and now a field engineer contracted to service communication towers. Each identity came with carefully forged documents and a complete behavioral script. How he walked, how he greeted people, even the slang he used. In Iran, linguistics were a weapon as sharp as any knife. His destination was an unassuming bakery in the Darban district, at the foothills of the Alborz Mountains. The place smelled of cardamom and roasted sesame. But behind its ovens operated something far more dangerous, a covert network of informants embedded deep within Iran's security apparatus. The baker, an elderly man known only as Sina, handed Eli a loaf of warm bread, the crust dusted with flour. Hidden beneath the loaf was a flash, drive so thin it could easily be mistaken for a sliver of plastic packaging. "Don't speak here," Sina muttered without looking up. "They upgraded the microphones 2 days ago." Surveillance in Tehran wasn't just pervasive, it was intelligent. Cameras analyzed gait, posture, even micro-expressions. The regime's cyber units monitored keywords, unusual traffic, and suspicious movement patterns. Mossad's success depended not on brute strength, but on outsmarting a system built to trap ghosts. Eli walked out of the bakery and blended into the flow of pedestrians. He slipped into a narrow alley where an outdated power box hummed quietly. Inside its metal casing, hidden beneath bundled wires, was one of Mossad's smallest. Relay devices installed months earlier during a separate operation. It created a fleeting, encrypted channel long enough to upload the contents of the flash drive. He inserted the chip. A small green LED blinked twice. Connection established. The data was explosive. Blueprints of a covert research facility. Internal memos detailing the transfer of equipment between IRGC units. Satellite coordinates for a restricted underground complex. And most critical of all, the travel schedule of a high-ranking engineer involved in a classified weapons program. Eli's pulse quickened. This was the kind of intelligence that reshaped national strategies. But as the last file uploaded, a distant sound pricked his instincts. Boots on pavement, too synchronized to belong to civilians. He closed the power box and stepped away casually, blending into the night. From the corner of his eye, he saw them, 2 men in dark jackets, moving with the stiff precision of the Basij. Iran's paramilitary. Had the relay device been detected? Had the bakery been compromised? Or was this just routine patrol? Eli didn't wait to find out. He ducked into a crowded bus, slipping between passengers, just as the doors hissed shut and the bus pulled away from the curb. The paramilitaries watched it leave, one of them narrowing his eyes. Eli exhaled slowly. The city was tightening around him. The mission was accelerating. The bus rattled along Tehran's congested streets, each stop pulling Eli farther from the sudden sweep of Basij patrols in Darband. But his destination tonight lay far from the capital's noise beneath the earth, where Iran hid its most protected secrets. Using the transit crowd as camouflage, Eli exited 3 stops later and slipped into a taxi operated by another covert asset. The driver, a middle-aged man with sunken eyes and an unshakable calm, didn't speak. He didn't need to. His role was simple: deliver Eli to the outskirts of the city without attracting attention. An hour later, the taxi slowed near a barren stretch of desert dotted with abandoned industrial structures. To most eyes, the place was lifeless. To Mossad, it was the gateway to a labyrinth. Here, buried beneath layers of forged paperwork, shell companies, and military cover stories, was an entrance shaft to a subterranean transit tunnel used by IRGC technicians. It connected several sensitive research sites, including the facility mentioned in Sina, but something else appeared on the screen. A man seated on a stool beside the secure door, reading a newspaper. A lone sentry, unscheduled, unexpected. Eli frowned. The flash drive had indicated no guard presence during this shift. That meant one thing: internal suspicion was growing. He recalled the Basij patrols in Darband. They weren't looking for just anyone. They were looking for him. The drone's feed showed the guard yawning, bored but alert. Eli's mind raced through options. Neutralization was not an option. This mission depended on leaving no trace. He needed to lure the guard away without leaving forensic evidence. Then a thought sparked. He guided the drone toward a junction where gas pipes converged. With surgical precision, he triggered a micro-spark inside the drone, enough to ignite. A harmless but alarming flare of smoke, simulating a pipe overheating. On the monitor, the guard shot up, dropping his newspaper. He shouted into his radio and rushed down the tunnel toward the leak. Eli moved, silent, precise, unseen. He reached the secure door, tools already in hand. And deep inside the tunnel, alarms began to echo. The alarms pulsed through the tunnel like a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, and ominous. Eli worked quickly, knowing the guard would return the moment technicians confirmed. The gas leak was a false alarm. His hands moved with mechanical precision as he unclipped a tool larger than a fountain pen. He pressed the device against the biometric scanner. It emitted a short burst of electromagnetic pulses, scrambling the memory of the sensor for less than a second, long enough to open the lock without leaving digital traces. The door slid open. Behind it lay the transit hub, a cavernous chamber carved into the earth, illuminated by cold white lights. Tracks ran through, the center where small electric carts transported classified materials. Metal crates were stacked along the walls, each marked with coded identifiers. The air vibrated with faint mechanical hums. the sound of a facility. That was never supposed to exist. Eli scanned the room. Security cameras rotated on their mounts. Laser tripwires shimmered faintly across the floor. Timing was everything. He slipped a cylindrical device from his vest, an optical disruptor. Turning its dial, he activated a narrow beam that bent light around him for short intervals, creating visual blind spots just wide enough to slip past cameras. It wasn't invisibility, but it was close enough. He moved through the chamber like a shadow, careful not to break the rhythm of security patterns. His target was a reinforced crate placed on an elevated loading platform. According to Cena's intel, it contained the core components of a classified propulsion system, one the international community believed had been discontinued years ago. If true, it meant Iran had revived a program the world thought was dead. Eli reached the platform and slid open a panel. Inside the crate was a nested steel container sealed with multiple locks. He didn't need to steal it. Stealing would expose the infiltration. What he needed was far more ambitious. Extract the data stored inside the container's security module. He connected a slim cable from his wrist console to a hidden diagnostic port. Lines of encrypted code poured across the screen, dense, unpredictable, designed to resist every form of brute force decryption. But Mossad didn't need brute force. They had developed a specialized algorithm, tuned to Iran's proprietary encryption patterns, gathered over years of cyber operations. The console hummed as the algorithm began its silent dance. Minutes passed like hours. But then, access granted. Blueprints, component lists, timelines, procurement routes, internal communications. Everything needed to unravel the project from the shadows. He downloaded the data onto a microdrive no larger than a grain of rice. Then he sealed the panel exactly as he found it. No scratches, no misalignments, no evidence of intrusion. Just as he turned to leave, the floor vibrated. Footsteps. Not one pair, three! Voices echoed through the chamber. The guard had returned, and he wasn't alone. Their tone was tense, clipped, suspicious. The gas flare had been investigated quickly. Too quickly. Eli froze behind a steel support beam. The optical disruptor flickered its last charge. He had maybe 30 seconds of visual masking left. He heard one guard say, "Check the crate." I thought I saw something off on the feed. The blood in Eli's veins turned to ice. If they approached the platform now, they would find him, disruptor or not. He glanced toward the opposite side of the chamber. There, half covered by shadows, was a maintenance chute barely large enough for a human body. His only way out. He sprinted. The guards shouted. The chase began. The maintenance chute was narrower than Eli expected, barely enough room to crawl. He dove inside just as the first guard reached the loading platform. Flashlights swept the chamber. The beam grazed the metal floor where Eli had stood seconds earlier. "Someone was here!" a guard shouted. "Seal every exit now." Eli slid deeper into the chute, using his elbows to propel himself downward. The metal walls vibrated with the weight of boots hammering across the chamber above. Dust rained from the seams. Alarms blared, louder and faster than before, no longer a warning but a declaration. Intruder inside the facility. He breathed slowly, clearing his mind. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. The chute sloped into a horizontal duct that stretched beneath the complex. His wrist console projected a small map constructed from earlier drone scans, but the lines were incomplete. The underground network was larger and more complex than the flash. Drive had revealed, turning left, then right, bypassing pressure sensors marked on the map. Above him, muffled Iranian voices echoed through the ventilation system. "Block Sector C! He can't get far! Search the maintenance shafts!" They were close. Eli reached a junction where 3 ducts intersected. One slanted upward, the wrong direction. The second led deeper into unknown territory. The third showed a faint signal on his console. A hidden emergency vent, installed decades earlier when the tunnel system served a different purpose. He chose the third. The duct narrowed further. With each movement, metal scraped against his vest. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Behind him, a sound cut through the air, something metallic striking the interior of the chute. The guards had found the entry point. He pushed harder. After what felt like an eternity, he reached the end of the duct. A corroded circular vent blocked the exit. He pressed a small cutting tool against the bolts. They glowed red, melted, then fell silently to the sand below. He slid out and hit the ground on his stomach. Cool night air washed over him. He was outside. But he wasn't safe. Searchlights swept across the desert surface. Trucks sped along the perimeter road. Dogs barked in the distance, tracking teams. The facility was going into full lockdown. Eli burrowed into the shadows behind a generator shed. His satellite transmitter, a device he'd been forbidden to activate. Within the facility, was finally in range of the extraction team stationed across the border. He clicked it once. A encrypted signal shot upward. Extraction in 18 minutes. Too long. A patrol vehicle rolled toward the shed, its headlights slicing through the sand. Eli pressed himself flat against the ground. Boots hit the dirt only meters away. Voices murmured. One guard pointed toward the generator. "Check behind it." Eli held his breath. Suddenly, from the opposite direction, a distant explosion thundered. A plume of dust rose over a nearby ridge. The guards snapped their heads toward it. "Sector F, go!" They sprinted toward the blast. Eli didn't waste the miracle. He ran, quiet but fast, across the dunes, keeping low, leaving no clear footprints. Each second felt like borrowed time. At the extraction point, a silent quadcopter drone hovered, barely visible against the night sky. A ladder unrolled. He climbed. As the drone ascended, lights from the facility blinked across the desert like angry red eyes. Eli looked down once, not out of fear, out of respect. He had entered Iran with nothing but a disguise and a mission no one should have survived. And he was leaving with the one thing more explosive than any weapon: the truth.